Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to a brand new episode of Show Up to Win podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Morton. I'm the owner and founder of Show Up to Win, and I love to spotlight other people with resilient stories. This next guest is someone that I just met a few months ago. An incredible human being. His name is Ken Miller. And so Ken is a best-selling author. He's a dynamic speaker. He is a transformative business leader whose powerful life story continues to motivate professionals and communities across the country. As the author of Becoming Ken, he shares his riveting journey from addiction and adversity to personal and professional triumph. He offers a candid blueprint for leadership, resilience, and reinvention. With over 2 decades of experience in the prestigious CFRE credential, Ken brings both authority and authenticity to every engagement. And so it's my distinct honor to be able to welcome my friend, Mr. Ken Miller. Ken, man, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here. I know you have a very impactful story, an impactful journey. And so just share with the listeners a little bit about yourself. Take a couple of minutes, and then we'll go and we'll talk more about the story and explain explain more about your story and the reason why we brought you on here. And share different aspects with the audience.
Sounds like a plan. I really appreciate that, Dwayne. Welcome all the listeners and individuals who are watching this podcast. Yeah, my name is Ken Miller. To give you the quick version, I'm 62 years old. I went through 6 years of foster homes. My father was what we call a violent alcoholic. I dealt with him shooting my mother 6 times. And then I've also dealt with being a homeless person on the streets for 20 years. I'm also a 3-time incarcerated felon. I spent many years behind bars. But today I'm a business owner. I'm a grandfather. I'm an all-around nice guy. And I own 5 businesses. And in many estimations, I've been very successful. I'm an author, speaker, entrepreneur, mentor, and all of the above. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, man, you have a very impactful story, very powerful story. And I love the fact that you have this aspect, but you also you only trace back to the negative to emphasize the positivity in life. And so you were talking about your mom had been shot 6 times. Let's just dive into, early Ken's childhood. What type of lesson would you say there was that brought you through all the other things? I think that psychologically, but between the 1 and 8 year range, there's just so much to impact, right? For kids, that's usually where the things that they get stuck at later on in life.
True. The formative years, and I'll just go 1 through 6. I mean, that's your childhood before you go into school. And from age 1 through 6, I was in foster homes. I was put up for adoption at birth. My mother was a white teenage runaway, and my dad was a black married pimp and drug dealer. That's the facts. 1962, New York. So I was put up for adoption, wasn't adopted, went through foster homes for 6 years, and then I was adopted by Irene and Sam Miller. Unfortunately, my father was an alcoholic, and we'd say a type. He was a violent alcoholic. But the key thing is, what are you could say, lessons learned or what's ingrained in you? And as a child, what was ingrained in me is that I wasn't wanted. I wasn't wanted. I went to 20, 30 different foster homes. I was not wanted. I knew I had a mother that had, quote unquote, at that time, I thought, threw me away. And I was to find out later that wasn't a truth. but that's the best way I could interpret it because I knew I was different being a foster child. And so that was very, very formative to me. So I've always, what did I gain out of that? I started doing facades to be attractive to people, as in that I wanted you to like me. I would do anything for you to like me because if you didn't like me, you might reject me and or throw me away. So I had that till I was in my 40s, unfortunately. But I've overcome that. I understand it. And in my formative years, that was probably one of the key things. The other thing I learned, and I want to say this, Dwayne, is I learned early on how to lie, how to tell an untruth. And I used that as a protective mechanism, predominantly for my father, in that he would have a list of chores for me to do. And if I did not do those chores to his satisfaction, there were repercussions, physical repercussions. So he would ask me, did I do XYZ? Yeah, I sure did, knowing I didn't do it, just so I could be protective from the violence that he was willing to put upon me.
Yeah. So it goes back to just our limiting beliefs of just us being,
Mhm.
we want to be safe and secure.
Yeah.
So we're going to learn we're going to learn traits that are maybe not to the best thing for us to use or utilize, but at that time and that spot is the energy that our brain, our personality wants to use to keep us safe and secure. And so learning to lie in those type of circumstances, people talk about white lies, that type of thing. With this is a way of just complete protection for yourself and shielding yourself. And so as you're learning to lie, you're learning these different things. It's keeping you safe, but it's also for later on in life, those are going to be that where you're walking on pretty much a razor blade the whole time. You're safe and secure in this situation, but later on in life, that doesn't really work out too well. So, can you just kind of give the listeners a little bit more from past the childhood? Let's go into your teenage years and
Mhm.
how that, because I assume that's going to be more where you're going to start going into a certain direction, just because you're kind of guided in it, especially in that environment. Also, you're kind of guided into I'm not being wanted. I'm having to do everything that I want to, how to feel loved. So can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah. So I get adopted when I was adopted, and this is the term I use, and I've used it on a few other times where I've spoken. I was damaged. That's the term. I was damaged. I was damaged when I was 6. I was damaged when I was 17. I was damaged when I was 30, and really until about the late 40s, early 50s, I was damaged. I am not damaged today. I know that. I am well. Okay. So, but let's go back to age 6. I get adopted. I could not read, I could not write, I couldn't tell time, and I could not even tie my shoes because the foster homes weren't teaching me those things. They didn't have an investment in me as their child to do these. No problem. So my mom taught me how to read, fell in love with reading, and by second grade, I'm reading at the 5th grade level. I was precocious, we'll say. By the time I was 17, I was a National Merit Scholar. I was accepted to Harvard. I went to Dartmouth, Ivy League, one of the top schools in the nation. But I went there at age 17, damaged emotionally and mentally. And what does that mean? Well, it means that in my senior year, the last 3 months of my senior year, I hid out from my father. I had to hide. He was so violent towards me that he went to jail, and I was hurt physically. And so my mother and I had to hide out. This is my senior year, should be my most enjoyable time in life. So I go to college carrying all that baggage and damage and fear that I had to deal with as a high school student. So I go off there and I'm introduced to the fraternity world. And I tell people all the time, I graduated with a degree in fraternity with a minor in drinking. That's what I graduated Dartmouth with. And so I got out and I was damaged coming out due to, again, a lot of it had to do with fear. That was an overriding emotion growing up. So that gets me to about 21. And I go to my first treatment center, my first of 14 treatment centers, and do well for a couple years. And then we'll catch us up. By the time I relapse after 2 or 3 years, I literally was homeless and or in jail or prison for the next 20 years.
So, first of all, the fact that you broke free through that part, went to college, and then you got your degree, like you said, and fraternity drinking, and then still was like, I think it falls into that people pleasing mode. When we get into that people pleasing mode, then we're just like, yeah, yeah, like we want to be loved so much. Do you feel like that was one of the things for you? Is just that you felt you wanted to belong that bad, that you had that earnest feeling of I want to be wanted, and that was all these people. You were like, oh, all I have to do is just be the life of a party or drink with the guys. Was that possible?
So this is a funny story. So I get out of college. I am 21 years old. I'm 6'2". I was a good looking guy. I modeled later on. That's another story for another day. And I have an Ivy League education. I'm wearing Hickey Freeman suits, Allen Edmonds wingtip shoes. Those are the old guys' shoes with the dots on them. I'm wearing wingtip shoes. And I can buy any car in the world that I want to buy. But I want people to think that I'm safe, and I want people to like me. And I don't want to come across as either dangerous or anything else. So the first car I bought as a 22-year-old Ivy League graduate was a Pontiac Sunbird station wagon, brand new. That's how unobtrusive I wanted to be. And I look back and I laugh at that now. A Pontiac Sunbird station wagon. I wanted to be like so bad, and I wanted to come across as so safe. And I didn't want to give you any excuses to reject me because I'm still a black man, 6'2". But if I look safe, then, and if I can articulate well and dress well, then you may not reject me because it was so part of my consciousness that I did not want to be rejected.
So I was about to bring in the whole race part with you,
Mhm.
and I mean, you're extremely intelligent. You're in a top tier level of higher education. So I assume that there was that part too, and also as you as being a people pleaser, and you want people to feel safe and secure around you, and so you decided, hey, I want to go buy this station wagon just so people will be able to accept me. That speaks volumes, my man. Like of
Sure does.
just of how, because you could have, like you said, you could have had any car you wanted, and you decided to
Corvette,
get a station
Camaro.
wagon.
Yeah.
Right. Could have had a sports car. I mean, so um, yeah. So Ken, while you were in that damage part, and as you were becoming more successful as um, in business, you have the right type of connections. Where did that just kind of like fall apart? Where the damage, the emotional damage, started like kind of taking that string and pulling it? Was there a certain time where you feel like looking back, you were like, where I was like, hey, this string is starting to get a little bit pulled out from under me, but also like I'm pulling it because I'm emotionally not well.
Right. So emotionally not well, but sober, I can act the act. Now internally, I'm struggling, but I'm not using drugs or alcohol. What happens is once I take the drugs or alcohol, that takes down the fence. And now I'm coming over and letting out all that anger, all that fear, all that angst that I have, and I'm manifesting it or showing it in society, okay? And to self, because I'm angry at me, okay? I'm guilty. So I'm out of college, I'm clean and sober, and a year and a half out of there, my dad goes over to my mom's job and shoots her 6 times. And while he's shooting her, he tells her, I'm going to shoot that SOB Ken next because I'm the only child, right? And he was going to come to my job and shoot me, but the gun jammed. But my mom had 5 bullets in her. Okay. She goes to the hospital. I did not deal with that situation. I am so damaged that I went and saw my mom on the gurney with the blood coming through the sheets before she goes into surgery. And she was super happy that I was alive because she thought that he had gone over and shot me. And she loved me unconditionally. I went over there and I said, Mom, is there anything I can do? And she's like, and she's, whatever, getting ready to go to surgery. And then I left her, I grabbed her purse, grabbed her shoes, and I went back to work. I asked permission for my boss to go visit my mom in the hospital. She's been shot. Do you mind if this is the exact voice I had. Do you mind if I go to the hospital and see my mom? She's at Providence. He's like, of course, do whatever you need. But I came back 20 minutes after seeing my mom on the gurney, didn't wait in the hospital, and went back to work. And you would never have known anything had happened. That's how I dealt with trauma. And so again, when I say I was damaged, I was damaged. So anyway, I found out a year or two later in treatment, my mom felt really bad about that. She thought I didn't love her, but I just didn't know how to show that emotion. I encapsulated all that emotion, pushed it down, and then work has always been my relief. Work has always been my relief because I can work. Okay. And so I went back to work.
So you couldn't. I mean,
Mhm.
basically, you weren't given that block of like how to love, how to be loving, but also how to have that part where it's like this isn't the trauma. You were so used to being in trauma that like when that trauma happened, you were just like, this is just another day,
Just
man.
another.
Like I just got to get back to work because that was what you truly like. That was your jam. That was the thing that you
That
knew.
was my
Hey,
defense mechanism to not feel. See, I was beat so many times as a child, and I don't really want to like go into the beatings. I just was
sure, sure.
beat a lot. Okay. And the way I dealt with that is once the beating was over, I just went inside. Because as a 7-year-old, you can't understand why. And there really wasn't a why, other than my father's an alcoholic that was self-pitying alcoholic. Okay, it's a certain type and angry. And he was angry at me because he had already had 2 kids with his first wife. He didn't need any more kids. And now I'm taking love away from this beautiful woman that's his wife. Okay, that's how he looked at it. And I understood this years later, decades later. So he took out a lot of his inadequacies, his experience with racism, his sense of lack of competency. He's got a wife that out earns him as a black man. That's tough. Okay, as a black man. Okay, but he's dealing with that. Anyway, I'm the one. He just transfers it over to me. That those feelings. So I'm dealing with all that, and the only way I could deal with it, there was 2 things I would do. One, I would encapsulate, bring all the emotion in, and just stuff it. And then the other thing I would do, and I still do it to this extent, is I would try to create order in my life. Order. And I'm talking about the physical environment. I would try to bring order to that. So I would literally throw away everything, all my toys, everything, and just have this super, super clean and ordered world. Because I thought if I could have the environment ordered, then I could have my interior ordered. And it doesn't,
Gotcha.
unfortunately, work like that. I still have order. I love order.
Right. So, because let's go into where, like I said, the string got pulled and
Mhm.
it's unraveling. Bring me to that point of where the addiction started coming into place, where that puts you into the place of the penitentiary, and then we'll go from there,
Mhm.
and then we'll start talking about all the positive stuff.
Yeah, no problem. So what happened was, remember, I was sober, but I had a bunch of guilt. I had guilt over 2 things. One, how I dealt with my mom, but I really didn't have guilt over that so much. What I had guilt was the day, 2 days before he shot her on a Monday. But on Saturday, I went to my dad's with my stepbrother to his apartment and I saw the gun and we were going to take the gun. But he convinced us not to take the gun. And it's the same gun that shot my mom 2 days later. And I could have taken that gun. And you talking about guilt. The reason she got shot was because of me. That's the way
Oh
I looked
no.
at it. I don't look at that now, believe me. But I'm 22 years old, damaged. So I stayed sober for another year. And remember, at this time, I'm making $50,000 a year, which is a lot of money in '86. I'm making 50 grand. I look good, smell good, talk good. And I go to vacation in Hawaii, and I had this bright idea. Now that I've got all my ducks in a row in the external world, I can drink without pain on the back end. But I can't. I'm an alcoholic. Let me just explain this for everybody on this call what an alcoholic is. Well, let me put it what I am as an alcoholic. I have the inability with any certainty to control the amount I drink when I start. That's what it means. I can't control the amount. And I can go in and say, I'm only going to have two, I'm only going to have three, I'm only going to have one. But there's no sense of certainty. And I believe this to the every cell in my body that I can control. Because I didn't go there to be a full-blown alcoholic again in Hawaii. Within 2 days, I'm broke and drinking till the wheels fall off. Barely made it back to Anchorage, Alaska from Hawaii because I got stuck. Okay. And so within a year after that, I am homeless on the streets of Seattle, Washington. And I'm talking homeless. So I'm going to bring it up to date to the recovery. So that's 1987, 88. I'm homeless. By the time 90, I pick up my first misdemeanor. 91, I pick up my first felony, burglary. I'm on the streets. I'm a hustler. I'm a pimp. I'm an armed robber. I did a kidnapping. I did a lot of bad stuff out there. And the key one, and I always tell people because it's important in my story of resilience, is that I was a male prostitute. That's what I did. I was a good looking guy, and people paid for my services. And that's what I did to pay for my crack cocaine and alcoholism. But I hated it. And so I was very shame based about what I was doing on the streets to pay for my drugs. So we fast forward, I continued in that realm, would go to treatment, I'd go to jail. And then starting in approximately 99, 2000, I picked up my second felony. I go to prison, go back to prison. And then in 2004, September 22nd, I pick up my third felony. They give me 6 years for selling a $10 rock of crack cocaine and also tell me my next felony is 25 to life, no matter what it is. 25 to life. It's called the habitual criminal statute. And I made a decision. I need to make a change. Had a conversation with God. So if we want to get to the part where the change starts, just ask me the next question. But that's what I did on the streets. That's what I hurt a lot of people. And I hurt myself, try to commit suicide a couple of times. Just all the things that we do when we're in that much self-hatred and we are down to no hope. No hope.
So really, my question, I think I'm not really going to ask a question on that part of the timeline. I feel like
Yeah,
that
that's no problem.
was, I'm just letting you know, like, I feel like that was as the best explanation, but as people go through stuff, like you were going through some stuff
Mhm.
and let's take that part and, like, I love to reframe things. So let's, like, wad that
And
thing up, like in a piece of paper, wad that up, throw it. It's a lesson for other people though, right? And out of that lesson that someone else has taken, when you turned your life around and you had that conversation with God, what was that first 24 hours like after that conversation? The discipline, the different aspect of, like, hey, I'm a better Ken. And I know there was some challenges to that part, but what was that thing that I'm sure you probably wrote down and you were like, I'm going to do this, and then you started doing something consistently, because that's the true that is the part of transformation. Being consistent. You have to begin, but you also have to be consistent with one of those changes.
Okay. So I just want to see how I want to frame this. September 22nd, 2004. I love facts. Okay. I get arrested for the sales. Great. At that time, I'm about as low as I've ever been. Pair of sneakers, no socks. Pair of shorts, no underwear. A t-shirt. That's all the possessions I owned in the world. Living in a closet. Okay. So I get arrested. I am literally crying in gratitude for being arrested because I can do prison. I can't do kin on the streets. So that takes care of my damage. I go into jail, and I'm in jail for about a month. And I'm in Washoe County Jail, which is called Parr Boulevard. I'm in Unit 13. I'm lying on the bunk, and I had no thought this was going to happen. And I had a conversation with God. People said, what does that mean? What it means is God spoke to me internally, and I listened because he's been speaking to me a few times. And I would speak to him. I'd pray to get out of this mess. Okay, that's me speaking to God. But I'm listening. And this is interesting. When I was listening to what you were saying, Dwayne, God does not, or at least he didn't for me, didn't say, do X, Y, Z, 3 times a day, da, 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 da. No, what he indicated to me is that I'm here and I will always be here by your side. Walk through this with faith and courage, and we'll get to the other side, which is the next day, without doing something that's actually against my will. Okay, and I'll talk maybe a little bit more about God's will later. And ever since that day, I haven't wanted to use. Okay, I've had hard days, tough days. I've lost 2 mothers and a wife, dead. They died since that moment. But the key thing is I had the strength, the faith, the fortitude to walk through them with his help. But I had to do a lot of work after that. And we can talk about the work that
That was
entailed.
kind of what I wanted to lead into, is getting into the work part,
I love
because
it.
yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is for one of the listeners, just one. They hear this and they feel like they've been through a lot of stuff, and then they realize that their nightmare is really someone else's dream. And we can use some other example, but that is where transformation really happens. But it's that light bulb that comes over somebody's head and be like, I've had it rough, but like that person right there, and I'm not a big comparison person, but when you're in that victim mentality, it kind of helps, because then you're like, oh well, this person did this, maybe I can get through my stuff. And so, yeah, just tell me a little bit about the transformation work that you went through.
Okay. So the name of my book is Becoming Ken, because that's what it is. It's about becoming who I am today, becoming Ken. Because before I had a street name, before I identified as an addict, I identified as a criminal, I identified as a pimp, I identified dot, 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 dot. Okay. So I became Ken. How did I become Ken? So 3 months in jail, I'm sentenced and I go off to penitentiary. I'm looking at 6 years on the back end. We call it the back end long, but I end up doing 3 inside. Then I have parole. But this is the key. And again, God is so good that it allowed me to have enough sanity to understand what I needed to do. And so what I did is when I walked into the penitentiary, I said to myself, if I am the same person walking out of this penitentiary as I am coming in, I'm going to have the same results. And so I need to work on physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. I have to work on all four of those. And I'm talking about work on all four of those areas. And that's what I did. Physical, easy. I got in the gym, I power lifted, set a record on the yard, all that good stuff. Okay, great. Physical. Number two, intellectual. I had not used my brain in an intellectual. I had a vocabulary, probably about 30 words I can't say on this podcast out of my 100 that I had that I used on the streets. You don't have to be intellectual on the streets. And in fact, it's an impediment to be an intellectual on the streets because people are going to look at you askance and not trust you. So I had to, and what I did predominantly was read. In 1 year, I read 160 books. I went and just checked this 2 days ago. 160, because I write down every book I read. I've read 1,100 books since 2004, 1,100. But I did
Awesome.
160 1 year. So that's the intellectual. The two most important were the emotional and the spiritual. Remember, I was shame-based. I was shame-based. I was so afraid that you were going to find out about my secret. And what I did by working with a counselor, a civilian counselor, is that I took away the power of the negative secret. I took away the power of the negative. So I would meet with this person once a week, and I trusted her, and I could talk about things I couldn't talk about in the penitentiary or on the streets, things that had happened to me. Some things we don't have the time, nor is this really the platform that I'm not going to talk about. But there's things that happened to me. But every secret that I have spoken about publicly. I have from the stage. So it's not like it's a secret, to the world. Okay. The only thing I don't talk about stuff about my family or my wife or anything like that. Her stuff. Okay. So I dealt with that, took away the power of the secret. And I dealt with some of the shame, and I started to begin to deal with the anger and the guilt that I had. And then the spiritual. And I went to like 3 or 4 different spiritual or churches, because we have church in prison. So I did Christian, I did Muslim, I did like Buddhist, read a couple books because I'm looking, because I didn't come from a church background. And I'm looking. And finally, I got where I was comfortable, and I have what I call a very strong spiritual. I go to a Christian church, actually Episcopalian, and I just have a strong spiritual foundation that, and this is the key part, probably of everything I say, the most important thing is I have a spiritual presence or entity that modifies my behavior. Well, how does that happen? When I have a situation or problem, a challenge, a concern, and I only have them, I don't have a lot of problems in my life. But that 0.5% of the time in life, I go into prayer and meditation, and I ask God, what is the right thing to do? Not the thing that's going to be the least painless to me or the most pleasure for me, but what is the right thing in your eyes? And then number 2, in my wife. And then there's a big gap before anybody else. But I'm down like 5 or 6. But that's only, I don't pray when I'm driving down the highway, at least not usually. I don't pray when I go into the gym, before I lift. But you see what I'm saying? That is one of the most important things for me, is I have a spiritual presence that modifies my actions and behavior.
I love how you I love how you said that. I don't think I've ever had someone say that it helped modify or it
Mm-hmm.
modified. So I love the way that the stance with that. So once we got out of the penitentiary and the real Ken was able to show up with the intellect. No, I saw that face. So
Yeah.
we'll yeah, let's
Let's
kind of
unpack that
dive
real
into that.
quick, Dwayne. Let me unpack that. Not to interrupt you, I just want you. And the reason I made that is because we have this thing called micro expressions. Because we hear something like, ugh. I wish I had come out of prison and I could say to you, I got out in '07 and that I was fixed. I wasn't fixed. I had just started. It took me another really 5, 6 years to get to where I'm at today. And then actually, I would say the last phase where I'm at literally today is the last 4 years. But that first 5 years coming out of the penitentiary, I had a lot of work to do. Because remember, the penitentiary is controlled environment. And once I got out into the civilian world, we'll call it, or that community, it wasn't a controlled environment. People know how to interact with you in prison and on the streets by we have codes, we have community standards, and so we work by that, or there are repercussions. Well, I get out and people weren't playing by the same rules. Now, I'm not saying their rules were wrong, but they weren't playing by the rules that I had ingrained in me, or what I love to talk about are the scripts. So I had some friction when I first got out and for next couple of years. And then I had some behavior that I really, really had to look at. And I did and work through it.
Right. So there, I mean, yeah, I was gonna say, there had to be an adjustment period to being out, but also the language barrier, the communication barrier, getting your feet back into society and like being able to have relationships. I believe that would be another hurdle. I mean, I think it's pretty much stacked on anybody getting out. I mean, it cannot be. It's very overwhelming, and I would just assume. But I also feel like once they go through that period, then they're like they can live in that part of gratitude of, okay, I now can better my life. Um, I hope that I'm trying to put that to a standpoint of, because I've never been in jail, so that's another thing is like I'm just trying to give an idea for someone in my particular case who hasn't had to go through stuff like that, through those obstacles, and be able to have a better understanding of being able to become, what people would say a model citizen. I assume that because of that structure is gone. So, and you said like 5 years. So I guess the question would be, I assume there has to be this relationship part because we don't want to be alone, right? Would that be possible? The question for me is like, I don't know how to frame it to
All
where,
right, so let me frame something, because to the listeners, I want you to hear this. Many of you are in prison right now. You're imprisoned by your relationships. You're imprisoned by your self-talk. You're imprisoned because what a prison is a barrier between you and the joy of life and God's grace. Just me talking, okay? It can be a physical barrier, but it also can be a mental barrier, or it can be a barrier of a marriage gone bad. It could be a barrier of being stuck in a job that you hate every time you walk into the office or the facility. That's a prison, okay? And so, what I did to overcome those things, you can do also. And because what we want to do, people sometimes say to me, Ken, man, I wish I had your story to tell because it's quote unquote interesting. There's emotions involved. And I always tell them, no, you don't. You don't want my story. That's like going to somebody that survived Auschwitz and saying, hey, I wish I had your story to tell. No, you don't. You don't want to experience an extermination camp or a concentration camp. Okay? But you have stories. You have been imprisoned. Sometimes we're imprisoned by our parents. I'm talking about, I can't do this because my mom's not going to like it. She'll frown on her. My dad will make me feel less than if I date this girl or date this guy or whatever. Okay? So that's one of the things I love. What I talk about is universal. And the overcoming from the setback is universal. But it's grounded in doing specific things. The number one thing and this is my belief, this is me talking, Ken Miller, to be resilient is you have to be grounded in truth. You have to be able to see truth. We used to have a saying, what's really going on? What really happened? Without looking at it from an emotional lens or a self-serving lens, what really happened? Because if you don't solve for that problem, concern, you're answering the wrong question. I hope you people are getting this. So everything when I teach this from the stage nationally, first thing is truth. Whether it's a resilience from something that's known or unknown. That's what my speech is. Resilience in the face of the known and the unknown, because they're two different things. One, you're going to have a setback. You know your mother's dying, and it's going to be a setback. But we can prepare for that. So there's things we can do there. And then there's ones you're walking down the street and somebody threw the safe out the window. There's a picture of the safe going down, and you're just walking along, happy-go-lucky, and you get the call. Mr. Miller, your daughter is in the hospital. She's been hit by a car. That didn't happen to me, but that's the kind of things you had no clue that was coming. The day my mom was shot, I had no clue that was coming. But how do you bounce back from that? So anyway, those. Mhm.
It's controlling your emotions in the known and unknown, and as you're dealing with the known, being able to figure out and realize this is how I'd have to deal with the known, and when an unknown, for me, the shooting happened, and I knew to use certain tools, because if I didn't use those tools, I could have, you know, I could have lost control of the situation. And so
Mhm.
that's the other thing, is when you're able to realize, hey, this is how I'm able to stay in emotional control, then that just gives you a better mental state. The mental state is going to keep you where you're able to actually, the mental state is going to allow you to go through the situation and be able to not just like freak out, not be able to just act as if you're unprepared. I mean, I think those are all different situations, but I'm really looking forward to how you tell people how to be prepared for the known and the unknown. And I'm looking forward to reading your book, Becoming Ken. So there's different aspects. I mean, me and you just know each other as friends, but also I think the most important thing out of everything in this conversation, Ken, is that, and this I can relate to you, is we've turned our pain into a purpose. But what I think some people do not understand is the reason that we bring the pain to a purpose is because of the higher, our spiritual part. And so, um, God bless you for being able to do it. And I know it's not just you being able to do it; it's because you're equipped.
What is true gratitude? What is true gratitude? Gratitude is an action. People always think it's a feeling. It's an action. You say you're grateful. Show it. Why don't you smile? Why don't you help someone? Why don't you open the door for that lady? Why don't you go on stage and speak in front of thousands? If you truly are grateful of God's grace, manifest it. That's my belief. This is the conversation I have with myself. I have a skill set, and my skill set is I can speak. I can articulate. I can't give you the reasoning and the antecedents before actions I've done in the past. But my gift is helping others. I don't do this to make me feel good or hubris or ego. I do this because I believe this is God's calling for me to do this. I do very, very well. I'm very, very successful. I make a lot of money. That supports my family. But I'm not working right now. I'm working for God, but I'm not working. This comes out of my workday. I'd have no problem. I got another one here in 2 minutes. As long as I'm called to share and that I can help others overcome their setback to be contributing members of this society and hopefully an individual that can find their calling, I'm doing the right thing. And
Yeah,
so
I love it,
with
brother.
that, Dwayne, I really want to
I know you
thank
got to
you.
go. Yeah,
Yeah, I gotta
yeah,
go.
absolutely. Uh, so I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, and I just appreciate our friendship and how it's going to grow. I believe we show up to help people. Those people help to bring better communities. Those communities bring a better world. And so, thank you so much, Ken, and thank you so much to the listeners.